from the crypt.
Hello, boils and ghouls. Welcome to a very special interview episode of Dads from the Crypt. Today, I'm interviewing director, producer, Stephen Hopkins. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Great. I'm in lovely London, where I've been working the last couple of years, and I'm living here again now, and trying to remember all about all those years ago back in the 80s and 90s. There we go.
Yeah. You're definitely one of the most prolific Tales from the Crypt directors with 3 episodes. And we'll get to those in just a minute, but let's get some background. So I saw you grew up in Jamaica?
I was born there and brought up there a little bit, and then went around America for a while, was in Britain for most of my schooling. Went to New York when I was 21, 22 to direct videos and stuff. I was directing videos in London, and then I went out to Australia for a month, which turned into 5 years, and then Los Angeles and New York, and then back here again. There we go.
They're a full circle. What was the first movie you remember seeing?
The first movie I remember seeing as a kid was Goldfinger.
Ooh.
I think. And I was born in Jamaica, and I was actually born, but Ian Fleming was our next door neighbor.
Oh, cool.
And the beach that Bond and Ursula Andress came out of was our beach at the time. I've got a great photo of myself as a 3-year-old with the two of them. And so I became a big James Bond fan and a Sean Connery fan, and as a 4-year-old.
Right.
So I think the first film I was taken to the cinema to see was Goldfinger, which is probably inappropriate for someone of my age. But I think the same year was also the Batman film. The great, the wonderful one with Adam West and all the madness. So.
The shark repellent.
Yeah. And I grew up. We traveled around the States a lot. I didn't go to school, so I just grew up reading comics in America, which is how I learned to read. I think, which explains a lot about my filmmaking stuff.
So yeah, that's a good question. So what were your early comic books that you were reading?
Oh, well, these were in the early 60s, so it was really Marvel when it started. I wasn't so into DC then. I have a collection of about 20,000 comics, just
wow.
Traveled around the world, me. But so yeah, it was all the really early Daredevils and Hulks and Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, of course. And and it was interesting looking back at those now, because they're such a time capsule of America, I think. And and that's really how I started to read, because I was just in the back of the car a lot. So as we were traveling around the States.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And so how did you get into filmmaking?
I was drawing comics for Underground. I used to draw comics for Underground Comics here. I did some splash pages for Marvel UK, and I went to art school here, which my comic drawing ability wasn't really respected there. and I was doing album covers for people like Adam and the Ants and different punk bands and stuff. And then I walked onto a film set one day with I met the amazing Russell Mulcahy, who has directed several of your episodes, and he's still my best friends, I think. And I said that I could do storyboards, and offered to do them for free to start with, which unfortunately they took me up on. And I think the first storyboards I ever did on a film set were for Duran Duran Planet Earth, I think. And then after I did hundreds of videos, but it started off because I could draw comics. I drew storyboards for rock videos. It was kind of an easy sideways slide, I think.
Mm-hmm. And then what was the first movie? Like, how did you get into actually being a filmmaker from there?
Well, from there, I everything exploded at that time. I happened to be in the right place at the time. I went straight from doing storyboards into designing sets and coming up for ideas and designing sets for, the first year we did 120 videos. We do 100 every year, and and I would just be racing around. Sometimes I have 2 or 3 sets in different stages at different times, and I just, lied a lot and said, "Oh yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. Yep, yep, I do that." And then you go away. And then I thought, I'm just doing loads of ideas and sets for directors, and their job looks really easy, so I'll do their job instead. And it wasn't as easy as I thought. And then I directed my first videos in London in the early 80s, and I moved to New York because there was a gap there with the company I was working with. And I started directing there and then doing big, quite big sets at that time. And even though I was very young, but I was just lucky. And then I went out to Australia from New York to do a bunch of Elton John videos, and he decided to get married to a woman, which was bizarre. And I got stuck there for a while and fell in love with Sydney and a girl, and it was a great place in the 80s because all the bands were living there then, Duran Duran and Elton John, and because it was tax-free and stuff, and there was a lot of great music coming out. So I just stayed there and worked there a lot, doing rock videos and commercials and a couple of big musicals, which I wrote and directed, and then touring with Mick Jagger and different bands doing their live stuff. And then I eventually came across to Russell Mulcahy asked me to design Highlander, which I didn't think I was good enough to do. I didn't know what I was doing. I was 25 or something. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. So, and then, I said, I can't do that, Russell. I said, I wouldn't know where to start really. But they said, can you come and do second unit? So I went and did second unit on the Highlander for months and months, and that was just a great experience. And I ended up, of course, working with Sean Connery a lot because I would end up shooting a lot of his stuff because he didn't have much time. So if the first unit couldn't do it, I would go in and cut his head off and do a big fighting scene between him and the Kurgan, and just follow Russell around and learn from him and fill in the gaps.
Mm-hmm. And then how did you make the transition to Dream Child?
Well, I was sort of quite a successful commercials and rock video director then, and then I did a small film called Dangerous Game in Australia, which turned out quite well, I think, for the amazing lack of money it had. But it was just, if we needed a piece of equipment, we'd make it in those days. And that showed in Cannes, and then a bunch of American producers saw it in Cannes. It was kind of a, kind of creepy, interesting action film, I think. And then I was invited to LA a lot. I went to lots of different meetings. I was going to do Pet Sematary at one point. And then that didn't happen. And then I just got a phone call from New Line to come in, and they'd seen that film, and they said, here's a bunch of scripts because there was a writer's strike on, and make something out of that. So I got that job in Valentine's Day, whatever year that was, 87, 88 or something, 88.
Yeah, one of the, and I think 89, so 88 probably.
Yeah. So, and then it was out in 4,000 cinemas in August. So we just, in fact, I was shooting after we finished mixing it, and we were just shooting. And I, because there was no final script, we weren't allowed to work with too many writers. I added some fun things like Super Freddy, and and all these kind of extra like fun things, the things I wanted to try out, which I had sort of done in rock videos. But
I was wondering because it has a lot of your voice in it, I think, but you were not credited as a writer on it. So I figured there was probably some guild or union thing.
I don't think I mean, the actors and I did make up some of the dialogue, but there was a story, but yeah, it expanded, a lot. I don't think many people have built the inside of someone's womb as a set before, so it was pretty.
Actually, Todd Masters told me about doing that when he did Look Who's Talking. He had to do like a womb with a baby. So it happens more often than you think. He says he has like a closet of prosthetic babies in his studio. Now, for the Dream Child was a big tonal shift from Elm Street 4. That movie was very bright and colorful. It's always called like the MTV Elm Street movie, where yours is very moody and gothic and expressionistic. Was that something that New Line wanted? Was that something you brought to the table? How did that kind of come about?
I think Bob Shea and said and Rupert and Rachel they said they thought it would become too comedic, the series, so we thought we'd go back to do. It was still camp, obviously, but they thought the friends would become a bit of a stand up, and they just wanted to go, back. But I don't think they were expecting sort of the big gothic thing that I had to go at, because being European, we just want gargoyles everywhere and horror things and stuff. So.
And all the impossible stairways going up and down.
Yeah, it just seemed like a good idea at the time, and he had no time to think. So we just shot in a empty shoe factory in Culver City, and we just shot and shot and shot and shot, and that's what came out.
Now, this movie has the lowest number of Freddy kills, but also has like some of the most biggest and most memorable, like they're like huge set pieces. Was that an intentional? Did they say we want to do less kills but bigger? Does that just happen organically?
I think that was, I don't remember that being a part of any agenda at all. I think, no, I didn't realize that, so no.
Right. I mean, because technically it only has 3, but it has the damn motorcycle and the Greta feeding are 2 of the most disturbing, I think, kills in cinema. Like feeding someone their own guts and then having someone fusing to a motorcycle in this like body horror, like Cronenbergian manner. They're both very dark and disturbing.
We got a lot of shit from the MPAA. We had to really, I just do so many different versions and cut so much bits and pieces out. Not as much as Predator 2, but they just were bringing in this new system, and they wanted to try it out on someone. So.
And then so also I can tell a lot of the character of Mark. I think it reflects a lot of you. Did you draw those comics that he has? Did you hire someone to do that?
Gosh, I can't remember now, because I used to do my own storyboards. But then I didn't have the time to do them really properly, so we would bring the storyboard artists in, and I can't remember if I ended up drawing the comics or. I mean, I remember drawing them out. I'm not sure if I gave them to someone else to finish. I mean, that was, in fact, 35 years ago. So yeah, I can't tell you.
Yeah. Do you still have any of them?
Somewhere in the storage here, I have endless boxes of all my storyboards. Someone's writing a little me at a part of a book about me in France at the moment, and they're asking me to find all this stuff, and I'm going, I know it's in there somewhere, but it's a mountain of stuff, and I have to. Not sure if I can find any of it. I mean, I found it over the years because I've moved around so much, but I finally had everything brought from all my storage in New York and LA and everywhere and to here. So it all landed here. Now I'm unpacking it and seeing what's there. But yeah, I mean, for Predator 2, I did 1,100 pages of storyboards.
Oh my gosh. That's
a lot of the color, and there was a sequence in it which was in ultraviolet. So I did that in black and ultraviolet color. And those days, I used to take it very seriously because it just really helped me. And I still do it a bit, but now it's sort of ingrained in my, in my thinking. So I don't do it as much. I do it for visual effects sequences and stuff. And obviously in Freddy, there was all visual effects sequences, really. Tons.
Yeah, no, you need to get like a coffee table book or something of your storyboards. That'd be amazing. You need to get like find some teenager with some time over a break and just have them catalog everything.
I
all right,
people would find them that interesting, but there you go.
Oh, I think we would. All right, let's move on to Predator 2. This is actually one of my favorite Predator movies. I mean, the first one was just groundbreaking in its own, but as far as just fun and action, it's funny because my parents wouldn't let me watch those movies when I was that age, but they let me read the comic book. So I read the comic book before I saw the movie.
The Dark Horse comic, was it
Dark Horse? Yeah, Dark Horse, because I had like the Alien 3 Dark Horse comic and then the Predator 2 Dark Horse comic.
Who drew that? Was that Ross Andrew drew that? Who drew that? I remember meeting the artist who was going to do it, and because while I was filming, I was talking to him about the style and stuff.
I don't know the name off the top of my head. I have it in storage somewhere as well in my like small comparatively collection. But yeah, I want to hear. So I've read a lot of crazy rumors about that movie, so I want to substantiate a couple things. Were you really pelted by bags of feces in some of the LA shooting locations.
Yeah, and bottles, glass bottles of urine too.
Ugh.
So it's still there. It's called Shit Alley. It's in downtown LA. A lot of people still film there.
Oh, really?
And over the years, and when I did 24 down there too, and I got the same thing happened because they just don't want you making noise all night because it's just annoying. So, and we actually got shot at on the roof too. I was shooting a scene where Danny Glover was chasing the predator across the rooftop, and he was firing blanks, and then we cut and the shooting carried on. We looked out across the roof opposite. There's a guy in an underpants just firing his gun at us because we were making too much noise.
Oh my god! And did you find a dead body in that alley as well?
Yeah, we did. We cleared out an alley because we did that scene where we filled it with water, where the predator met King Willie, and then down there, someone who'd overdosed or something like that.
Wow, that's intense.
And then LA was different then as it is now, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, LA early '90s is a bit different than it is now. Yeah. Now, whose idea was it to put the predator skull in the trophy case?
The alien skull, you mean, or
the xenomorph?
Well, it was Stan was doing it, and I was a part of trying to revamp the Predator for that second sequence. And you never saw the spaceship in the first one, right? Not inside it. And we had Larry Paul, this great designer. But then Stan, we did the version without, and Stan said, "Look what I've got." And so we thought we've got to stick it. They're both Fox things, and I remember Fox were offering me to do Fox for Alien 3 at the time, but I thought I can't do Nightmare 5, Predator 2, Alien 3 all in a row. I mean, it's just too much. And,
I would see that movie.
and then so it was. I mean, it's a natural light. It's a great idea, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's amazing.
We just show a glimpse of it in the end. I think really it wasn't like a full on. We didn't show it too. We weren't showing it off too much, right? It's just sort of seen there quickly, I think.
Yeah, but it's the kind of thing that like people pick up on, and it just explodes. It's just mind blowing that these are in the same universe. That makes too much sense.
Yeah.
Were you ever considered for doing another Predator movie or even an Alien versus Predator movie?
No, I never heard from anyone about it. I don't think at the time Predator 2 wasn't considered a huge hit, I think, but over the years it's made a lot of money, I think. And so but at the time it was sort of it was going to be Arnold originally, Arnold and Danny Glover together. And the opening scene originally was on a golf course. And there's this white-haired guy playing golf, and a helicopter lands, and someone comes out, and you find out it's Arnold with white hair and a scar across his face, and they're bringing him back in. And I met with Arnold about it, but in the end, it became a choice for him between Terminator 2 and Predator 2. And I mean, that's no choice, right? We've got to do Terminator 2 is one of the best science fiction films ever made, I think.
Right. Well, it also, I think he also did Kindergarten Cop around that time, because there's a great teaser for Kindergarten Cop because that mimicked the Predator 2 trailer, where it talks about they can't be reasoned with, they can't be bargained with, and you think it's for the Predator movie or another Arnold movie, and it turns out it's little kids.
He's such a smart guy, Arnold. He's very, very bright.
Oh yeah. Now again, Predator 2 was as we know, a Joel Silver production, and we've talked about Joel Silver's antics, and I think our friends Al and Gil just released another episode talking about Joel Silver. Do you have any good Joel Silver stories from Predator 2?
Well, I worked with Joel a bunch of times, obviously, and in those days he just really was such a force to be reckoned with. But I think he was mischievous, and he was doing Die Hard 2, which was causing Fox a lot of problems at the time, I think financially. And he would have big fights with Fox, and eventually he was actually taken off a lot during the film and wasn't allowed around for a long time, but he came in for the sound mix. But he knows those films back to front, and obviously when he called me up to do the Tales with him and Bob Zemeckis and Walter Hill and everyone, and then he had to. He knew that it was going to be a lot of production value, and it was going to be outrageous. And Tales of the Crypt was certainly outrageous. I don't think I've ever worked on something where HBO and Joel at the time would just ask you to make it more violent and more sexual. Because I've never shied away from those things, but I've never been encouraged to take it further. So.
Yeah, let's transition to that. So Joel Silver was the one that asked you to do that. Did they give you a choice of episodes to do, or did you like say? Were you familiar with EC Comics as a comic book fan?
Yes, I wasn't super knowledgeable about it, but I mean, I remember them quite clearly, and I remember I've still actually got some covers from with Mark Verheiden. It was a Mark Verheiden. I think. Oh, who did the cover?
I'm blanking right now. It's on the tip of my tongue. I don't know why I can't remember this.
Not Alex Saviak. No, Alex Saviak did some storyboards for me for the Reaping years later. Anyway, they were really fun, and I think I can't remember if I was given a choice or not. I remember I have read a bunch of those scripts over the years. I think I might have been given a choice between a couple of different ones.
Okay, it was Mike Vosberg. That's who did those covers.
Mike Vosberg. There we go.
I know. It was on the tip.
Great guy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He's still going at it too.
Yep.
Yeah. So they brought you on to Abra Cadaver.
Yeah.
And did you cast that, or is that kind of handed to you, or did you give you like a list?
No, we were given a list, and met Tony Goldwyn and Bo Bridges, and I worked with all the Bridges actually. I worked with Bo and Jeff and Lloyd. So but it's great to have that kind of caliber of actor. You do kind of fun stuff, and I had this great cameraman, Levy Isaacs, and it was such a fun story. God, it was fun. And
right.
It was probably the best of the three, maybe, in all that I did, or the one that just fell together at the end, the best it did. And
it's definitely the most intense, because they're like, because you're putting someone in the view in the shoes of Carl's character, who's comatose, but still cognizant, and that's kind of you did a really good job of putting us like in the POV of that, and like putting us in that mindset. So it's probably the scariest. I think the second one's the funniest, but we'll get to that in a second. But I love Bo Bridges' performance, because you don't usually see him. He usually plays the kind father character, or maybe a lawyer, but this is just him really hamming it up, and he seems like he's really enjoying it.
Well, he had such an amazing career, Bo. He started off as a really hip actor, and a sort of sex symbol and all that kind of stuff, and then he moved into something gentler, and then later on in his career became a bad guy and everything, right? But the fine line you walk with the Tales is not to be so silly you go shut up, yeah. So, but at the same time, not to be too serious, because that's the same problem. So you have to sort of find a middle ground and tell the story, and and try not to telegraph the twists.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's hard to do, but they're only 25 minutes long, weren't they? So
right. So you have to get in and out really really well.
Yeah.
And again, your episode's interesting because it's a flashback, or like kind of a preamble, and you don't usually have time for that. So you even like that's rather ambitious for a Tales episode to have that little black and white beginning part.
Yeah, which we actually shot in black and white because I was such a princess. I think.
Yeah, and again, you got some good gore in there. You have that great kind of shocker in the opening, which is a good little jump scare, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Any other fun memories from that episode? Did you have time to storyboard any of these, or is it just too quick?
God, good question. I think I probably sketched a bunch of stuff, because there weren't a huge amount of visual effects in that.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty more, if you're dragging someone along the ground, we drag the camera around the ground with the camera in his hand. So it wasn't very fancy, but
you still have to do a lot of blocking, because you don't want to give away the gags that he's actually on that he's not on the hook, or that that they're not actually taking out his brain. So you have to very carefully block what you're showing.
Yeah, we were well aware of making the audience do the imagination, imagining how gross it was, and trying
Yeah.
not to show too much. And but yeah, it was a perfect tale of the crypt, right? There's loads of dead bodies, there's a morgue, mad scientist, you're getting your head chopped off,
Hmm.
having heart attacks and dying. I mean, it's just all, it's all what Tales of the Crypt are made from, isn't it? Really.
Hmm. All right, let's talk about Beauty Rest. Again, another, I think, really funny episode. That Ballbuster perfume commercial
But
is
Alan,
hilarious.
I think Alan Silvestri scored these for me too, right?
I think he definitely did Beauty Rest. I can't remember if he did the other ones, but he did a
He
lot of
definitely
them.
did. He did the third one I did with Mimi Rogers. That was the
Mhm.
last one. And does is Beauty Rest that one or
Beauty
the
Rest is
second?
the second one.
Actually, the second one I shot was the one in the staircase one. That
Well, at
was
least season wise, that was the third. That came out in the sixth season.
was it? All
Yeah,
right.
Beauty Rest, I think was 4 or 5. I think it was 4. Yeah, it was 4.
Well, Beauty Rest was a riot. I mean, Alan did that, and one of the reasons I remember Alan working on that with me is because Buck Henry, there's a song in that,
Yep.
never in the script. And Buck, I was dying to work with Buck Henry. I'm such a huge fan, and he just came up with this hilarious idea and these words for an MC song for the thing. And Alan came down. They composed it on the spot and they recorded it, and that was kind of a high point, I think. But also, working with the rather fabulous Mimi Rogers, who I worked with later again, and Jennifer Rubin and Kathy Ireland. I mean, all these beautiful, interesting women. It was, it was very gothic and burlesque, wasn't it? It was sort of like Berlin, 1930s, grotesque, and it was good. It was sort of well. It was we could spend a lot of money on the club because there wasn't much else in it. There was backstage and things like that, and all the jealousy and stuff. And I remember once again, just being encouraged, show as much, nudity, show as much blood, have guts falling out of people's things. It just you couldn't get enough of it, and it was but working, being able to work with Buck Henry and Alan on something so bizarre made it feel like an art piece or something. It felt a crazy art piece with all these fantastic filmmakers, and we just laughed a lot.
Oh yeah, it's very. This is like one of the best dark humor episodes.
Yeah.
It's interesting that we say it's timeless because again, you're adapting comics from the 40s to be contemporary, but it still has like the genetics of those original comics, so it already has a kind of a timelessness feel to it,
Right.
which always makes it interesting.
You didn't want to date them too much, these comics, but you obviously have no choice. It was the 90s, right? So, I think each one I did was quite different from the other ones. Surprisingly, they all have the same formula, of a twist at the end, and people who are horrible people getting their just desserts, but the thing about those shows that almost everyone's horrible in them.
Right. It's hard to find a good person.
Yeah.
And then again, like that Ballbuster perfume gag it's so funny and over the top. Like they actually have a perfume with balls on it.
Yes. Yeah, I did a House of Lies episode years later. It was so, I'm not sure if we're allowed to say this, but we did a perfume called Cunt, and it was I mean, you want to do something outrageous and make a bit of a comment at the same time if you can. Ballbusters, have a funny one.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any good stories with working with Mimi, Jennifer, or Kathy?
It was all very quick in those days. I think we shot them in 6 days. I remained friends with Jennifer for a long time, and then Mimi, I did Lost in Space with her years later, and but they're all up for it. Everyone who got into those things knew that you had to leave your taste sensibilities behind a little bit, and just get into it. And because often they were such short shoots, we would often shoot them relatively in order, which is very helpful.
Yeah.
Because especially with all the blood and guts, you didn't want to have someone with entrails coming out and then go back and shoot the wrong thing and stuff like that. But everyone was just up for it. And then not only were the ladies up for it, we were just all killing ourselves laughing the whole time, but then Buck just steps forward and sings this song, and you go, oh,
that's so good.
I'll never do anything like this again. And there you go.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then the at the very end, is that Mimi Rogers with a prosthetic, or is that a live cast?
I know there was obviously a live cast, but
Well,
I'm trying to remember. I think, did we stick a head through? I think it was her face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because otherwise
because not only does she have to like stay in position, but she has to like stay in it, I'm sure, for take after take while listening to the song and trying not to laugh.
Yeah, and then we do these big crane movements and stuff like that. So it was all, she's very patient, I think, but understood the impact of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's an amazing ending. And again, that's the prop department. Props to the prop department, because you have the Miss Autopsy sign. I'm curious if that's like in someone's like home garage. where they have like their own like pool table and stuff. That'd be nice to imagine where that is right now.
Even picking the crowd was fun. We would just pick the strangest looking people, and the costume design was very smart. And that was a different cameraman, Rick Bota, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did a lot of them.
Yeah.
All right, then let's talk about your third episode, Staired in Horror. Again, you have I'm not sure if I can know her name. Rachel, is it Ticotin?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an.
I've seen her a bunch of stuff, including Total Recall.
Yeah.
And I didn't know DB very well, but he was fun. And then I was kind of excited about working with Ali Ermi, who was that guy. But we built a huge set for that on stage. I remember it was a big, built all the swamp and the house. We did matte paintings and glass shots, and we did glass shots or just matte paintings in those days, I think, too, to make it bigger and better. But they were big sets, and the inside of the house we built as well, with the stairs and all that kind of stuff. And it was probably the most, in a way, complicated story to be told. The others were a bit more straightforward, or maybe the others more organic or something. This was trickier to explain without giving away everything, without telling the audience what was going to happen. You had to give clues, and you had to be quite precise about the clues without going ta-da, and
I watched it.
Were all the episodes, were they copies of the comics, or
they were, at the very least, they were based on the title, and they might just have it might be like, okay, this is the title one that was in the Insane Asylum. We're gonna use the title, we're gonna put the Insane Asylum, everything else could be different. So, but I know at least your first, I haven't read the comic for the third one because we haven't covered it yet, but the first two were relatively close to the comics.
Oh, they were. I don't think I actually saw the comics.
Okay.
I just strips, and I think they told me at the time that they weren't exactly based, so I didn't. Maybe I didn't have the time, or didn't think it was necessary to.
It's usually like the main concept. So I'm sure in the comic there's a stairwell, and there's something about going up and down, making you older, younger. Look, I watched it for the first.
The stage of that episode is people are going up and down those stairs all the time. So it becomes like a stair commercial. So you have to try and find a different way to tell each bit of the story, I think.
Yeah, because I watched it, I think, for the first time the other night. And I was like kind of confused, a little disoriented about what was happening until, you wanted us to understand. I kept wondering, what is going on? But again,
I think that's a bit of the problem with that one. The other two had their own beats, their own murders and excitements, and this happens, and then now you're scared of being caught or whatever. And the Staired didn't really have that, did it? It was just one long sort of tease until the ending, I think. Yeah,
it's definitely a build-up. Did Rachel have issues with all that makeup? Because it seemed like a lot to kind of act through.
She'd worn a lot of makeup before. We discussed it, and as you know, like lighting makeup is quite tricky. Nowadays it's so much easier because nowadays you put CGI on top of makeup and what have you. But in those days, everything was shot on film, obviously, and even though we had a reasonable amount of money for everyone, you shot quite quickly. So doing makeup stuff in Tales was always the tricky bit. It had to be really good, and if it wasn't really good, you'd light it so you couldn't see it that well, and hope that HBO didn't pump tons of light into it later on and make sure you could see all the nasty join, But obviously, I'd done lots of makeup stuff with Freddy and Predator and everything, so I knew something about that.
Mm-hmm. And again, this is one where oftentimes the cover that the Crypt Keeper shows at during the preamble kind of gives away or gives you clues. And this is one where I'm like, wait, there's a baby in it, and I couldn't figure out what the baby meant until the very, very end. You're like, oh,
right. Yeah, that's true. Actually, I think even some of the titles would give away stuff, wouldn't they? I think not even cover. They were a bit dangerous, but hey, now people watch these things for fun, didn't they?
Oh yeah.
I think people just got really stoned in those days and watched it late at night and had a laugh. And it was definitely a series.
Right. Were you intimidated by working with Emery?
No, I don't think so. He was a very nice guy. He was he says like, I'm not an actor. I'm just like who I am, and he was a very nice guy. He wasn't tough or mean or anything. I've worked with tougher guys than that before, that's for sure, and since. But it's all the actors. I think it's a good point to that, because I think all the actors came in knowing it was fun.
Mm-hmm.
No one came in like it was going to make or break their career, or they had to take it too seriously. They came in and thought, oh, what are we going to do? And with all those wonderful producers, from Gil to Joel to Robert to Walter to everybody, there's just such a wealth of expertise that people took it seriously at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And I saw
that. Was it successful at the time, Tales?
I'm sorry?
Was it a successful series at the time?
Oh yeah, huge.
Even though it was so R-rated and everything, it was.
Yeah, well, HBO was kind of known for that at the time, and then I think especially by this time that they'd syndicated to Fox, and they did edited versions, and that's how as a kid I started watching them on Fox.
Oh, right.
The PG-13 versions.
Oh my god, that must be so edited.
Yeah, well, then you go back years later, oh, okay, I remember that. But even though it had that reputation for adding more gore, more boobs, compared to today, it's not. It's pretty tame. I mean, yes. It's all progressive.
It was a long time ago, wasn't it? It's just 30 years ago, some of it. And I remember Bo rang me up. I think the episode we did won awards. I think he won some kind of, I can't remember what they called them now. So they had awards for, and it was like, what? That's great.
Probably a Saturn or something.
It was a cable awards series. I can't remember what it was. And he rang me up, giggling, and so I think people actually, because of the scale of them, they were quite a big scale, weren't they? I think people took notice of them from that point of view, because the production value was big and the stars were big, and then I remember actually when I was directing one of them, I can't remember which was, Arnold was on doing another one. He was directing one at the same time, I think, in the same studio one day. So
he did the switch.
Right.
That was the directive. Was it's gotta look big. It's gotta look like a movie on TV.
Yeah.
So I'm looking up on Bo's IMDb. He won a Cable Ace Award for that episode. Actor in the series. So it paid off.
And I think we won awards for sound and all sorts of things too. I think.
I think Tim Curry, might have gotten an Emmy, at least nominated for his episode. So.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, it was definitely people were taking note of this, especially with that much star power behind it.
Yeah, and TV then was so different, wasn't it? If you're on TV, it was network broadcast TV in those days. There was no really serious adult television at the time.
Right, and then you had the Crypt Keeper as was a superstar of everything. Even if the episode wasn't great, you still got a good Crypt Keeper beginning, a good Crypt Keeper ending. So even if it wasn't the best episode ever, you still had that kind of dessert at the end.
And I think one of my episodes was put in one of the films too, because I get like a £2.33 residuals once every year for it being in one of because they put out 3 or 4 Tales from the Crypt films, didn't they? With episodes. I know one of mine was in there, I think.
Okay. And it's kind of funny because I think there's definitely a bit of Freddy Krueger was influenced a bit by the EC Comics kind of jokey sides, and then I think the TV version of the Crypt Keeper is definitely based on Robert Englund's performance, so it's kind of a circular.
Right.
There's definitely DNA throughout that.
Yeah, if you put them side by side, they'd be brothers, wouldn't they? They'd be siblings.
They'd be drinking buddies at least. Do you have any other stories from your 3 episodes you want to share?
Gosh, so if it was in the last 25 years, I might remember them better. But no, I just remember them being, a lot of films I've done or TV things I've done. They're all expensive and very serious and very intense, and I just remember how much fun we had, I think, on those things. And Joel would come down and he just want everything to be bigger and louder and, dirtier and weirder. And it was never really any sort of angst involved. And I never really dealt with HBO then. I've done stuff for them since, obviously, but they would keep everyone in the background, and it was really actually a very creative experience, because you would just come up with ideas and then execute them. I was going, okay, give it a go, and I don't think I had time to pull any hideous practical jokes on anyone or anything like that. Not like on when movies when you got months and months and months to get really bored with each other. It's
is that something you're known for?
Well, certainly, yeah. I mean, I've done quite big films which take a long time to shoot, right? So, providing you have actors with sense of humor, then I did a movie, Judgment Night, where there was just fantastic and hilarious and hellacious in the amount of practical jokes that went on a daily basis. And Predator 2 was such a huge production. I was only 28 or something, I think, and just running around Los Angeles blowing the shit out of things. And there was no, that was done during a writer's strike as well, actually. Did 2 films in a row during 2 different writer's strikes. So,
oh my God.
And then Jim and John were around, thank God, but we actually shot from a sort of document rather than a script, and so we'd often find ourselves shooting stuff and hoping for the best. But I've got to say the tail stuff was really scripted properly, and I talked to Gil and I talked to the writers before, and you get time to prep it so you could make it as good as you could. It wasn't just rushed through, and people really cared about it, and I cared how it looked and how it worked and stuff like that. And it was really, I can't remember many things I've enjoyed as much of that, or actually have been as outrageously creative, for the sake of it. There was no holds barred. There was no one to say, don't do that, but you were just encouraged to just go and break rules. And with that in mind, I think all the actors really liked that. Buck would come up with an idea, or doing Beauty's Rest, the ladies, the actresses would come up with bonkers ideas to make it even worse, and how their clothes were. So everyone was encouraged, I think, to have a great time. And then, because I was allowed, because I'd met Alan Silvestri through Joel on Predator 2, so I was allowed to bring in these, heavy hitters too, to do that kind of stuff. And we shot it all down in Culver City, I think, right by the motorway there. In the tiny little, well, was it? It seemed tiny, but it was tiny because it was all filled up with massive sets, usually from the next one or the last one, or being pulled out. We obviously didn't shoot on location very much, not for those things. They were so specific. I remember at one point, I think Tracy Lord was in Abra Cadaver, and it happened at the end. I think she was, they brought her in because she was supposed to be one of the naked girl who wakes up on the slab or something, and neither she or I thought it was really that appropriate. So,
because she's been in a couple episodes.
She was, right? She was very smart. I really liked her.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm a big fan of her dramatic work. All right, so let's wrap up with some fun questions. So this is what I call the miscellaneous section. Obviously, you're a big comic book fan. Do you have a favorite run that you go back to?
Well, I've been reading them for 60 years now, so I sort of gave up them about 10, 15 years ago from reading them all the time. I mean, I think the Vertigo stuff was life-changing. Obviously, all the Frank Miller stuff.
Mhm.
As a kid, I loved Daredevil because he was like the strangest character, and he'd go from dealing with someone on stilts to dealing with drug dealers in Hell's Kitchen, and
Yeah,
I never really loved the full massive superhero ones. I didn't love the Hulk so much or Thor so much because they're a bit earnest, weren't they? I think. And
yeah. Well, and the best Daredevils I always thought was when he's like in court trying to come up with, ways to help his clients and stuff. Actually, so I talked to Bob Gale a couple weeks ago, and he did a whole Daredevil run where someone's suing Daredevil. So he has to like appear in court and as a defendant, and he has to come up with all these wacky, workarounds.
right.
That's really fun. Is there a comic character that you would love to adapt to the screen?
Yeah, I always wanted to do the Batman. I almost did at one point. I always wanted to do Sandman at one point. I talked to Warner Bros. About doing it with Tim Burton as a Sandman, actually, a long time
Oh,
ago.
wow.
And
That'd be interesting.
and then I knew Jim Cameron quite well. And I tried to do a Spider-Man movie in the 90s before the digital revolution, and we spent months and months working on it. But it was going to cost $200 million in those days, and it was going to take 2 years to shoot.
Right.
So, because you just had to do everything for real, So I met Stan Lee. I wanted to do Doctor Strange. I met Stan Lee a bunch of times, and I always wanted to do Doctor Strange. That was the one I thought would be the most fun, mind-bending. I think they did a great version of it with the first one.
I think you would make a great Stan, Doctor Strange. I could definitely see that fitting. When were you in talks about doing Batman?
I think back in the early 80s, back in the early 90s. I think before they decided who was doing it, I was sort of involved with Warner Brothers a lot then, and I was probably one of 800 directors who were. But I've started a couple of James Bond films, and I just didn't end up doing them because it just the scripts or whatever. But I always think Predator was kind of a comic book film too.
Oh yeah, no, I think all your films are comic book movies, but yeah to a degree, which is great. I think that's why I love it. I mean, I'm a big fan of like Ghost in the Darkness and Lost in Space and all those. I mean, that's kind of the movies I kind of grew up, or at least as a teenager, was watching.
Right.
That's kind of my segment, and those are awesome movies. All right. One of our traditional questions is that in the very first episode of Tales from the Crypt, the great William Sadler goes into a diner and asks for a cheese sandwich. Doesn't specify the cheese or the method or anything. If you were to do that, what kind of cheese sandwich would you want? What kind of cheese?
I'm kind of a big fan of raw sheep cheese. So Manchego would be mine. I don't know if you'd find that made on. You would now, I think. I love myself a bit of Manchego or raw goat cheese. I like the taste of that. But good question. I might have one right now.
There you go. And then our final question, obviously, we're dads from the crypt, and we give dad advice, sometimes questionably, but as the Crypt Keeper would. But what kind of advice would you like to give our audience?
What kind of advice?
Mentor, fatherly advice.
Look for the signs and make sure you're not going down the wrong dark alley with the wrong people, I think.
Don't you get pelted with bags of feces.
Well, I remember once I had to do a shot, and the sun was coming up, and the actors couldn't hear me because it was so far away, and the radio stopped working. I went, "Fuck it!" So I just ran, and I was zigzagging because it goes flop. Just running, doing this sort of zigzagging up the alleyway to get my message across, and it was quite exciting. I think. Yeah, don't go up that alleyway unless you have to. And then, there's still even downtown they tried to gentrify it. It's still pretty rough down there, especially with all the difficulties that LA is having right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, don't go running around shit alley at late about 3 o'clock in the morning.
No, that's great advice. Don't go down shit alley at 3 a.m. And what are you working on next? What's next in the hopper for you?
I don't know. I just spent a couple of years doing this thing for Apple called Liaison, which is out now. There's the 5th episode coming, 6th episode coming up next week. It's a 6th episode thing. It's a sort of big, weird, romantic, dark thriller, half in French. And we shot it in France and Belgium and Morocco and here during COVID. So it was a hellish shoot. And now I'm talking to a few different people about different things. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. But my bank manager says I have to go back to work. So something's going to come on.
Excellent. Well, best of luck to you. Stephen, thank you for coming on the podcast. Where can people find you? Are you?
I'm not really a social media person. I'm on Instagram. I think Stephen James Hopkins, but nothing, just stupid shit from my friends, really. So, but
hey, if you have an Instagram, start putting those storyboards on there. People will love it.
Yeah. If I can ever, I know where most of them are, I think. And then I had a bit of a flood, so some of them got stuck together, but I still have tons. I've still got, and I have, when I did Nightmare on Elm Street 5, I flew from Sydney, where I was time, to LA, and I was the back seat on this really shitty flight with, in the economy, right at the very back, and I was drawing these huge storyboards all the way, and the people next to me hated me. I had all these crayons and stuff, and I did massive storyboards because it's quite a long flight. And I got straight off the plane, took the storyboards to New Lyme, and got the job. I found them the other day. So they, it was just lots of nuns and gargoyles and Freddy's. In fact, Peter Levy, the DP who shoots almost everything I do and has done for 40 years now, he and I are 2 of Freddy's fathers. We're in the mental asylum.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we actually rape his mother, as you do. And but we were so prominent when the editor put it together. I said, no, you can't just be all about us. I'm not sure if we're still in it. Maybe we are. I'm not sure.
That's funny. All right. Well, that wraps things up. I appreciate everyone for listening. And with that, we thank you for listening to Dads from the Crypt.
Thanks a lot, mate.
Follow Dads from the Crypt on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or I will follow you to the grave. No, seriously, you really should watch. But be careful what you ask for. You may get it.